All right, if everyone could take their seats, we're going to start with our next panel. Thank you. If everyone could just quiet down, we're going to start with our next panel. As everyone knows, the breeding industry, the thoroughbred breeding industry, maybe we'll hear something different from the harness folks, but the thoroughbred breeding industry has seen decline pretty much everywhere outside of the state of Kentucky. So we're going to look for some solutions to that today with our next panel, and I'll introduce our moderator, Paul Reinvigorate.
Thank you. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this. I think that there's been a lot of talk the last 20, 30 years about the breeding industry, where it's going across North America, and you know, the declines in the foal crop ever since the tax laws changed in the mid-'80s. I mean, I've been coming to this symposium since '94. It's been covered in the past, but I think we're at a stage now where people are actually sitting down and talking. Following the recent study that Racing, Gaming, and Entertainment did for the state of Iowa, in 2023, the states of Kentucky, Florida, California, and New York made up 74.1% of the foals annually foaled in the United States. And Kentucky made up 47.1% of that. Now fast forward 2 more years to 2025, and those 5 states make up 83% of the foal crop, with Kentucky over 60%. So every other state, Canadian province, and Puerto Rico are 17% of the foal crop. And if you look at the numbers, it was 17,300 in 2025, and they're forecasting 17,000 for 2026. So if you go with the 17%, that's 3,000 foals amongst the other jurisdictions that have thoroughbred breeding. That's tiny. So what is a small jurisdiction supposed to do? It goes without saying that jurisdictional governments look at employment and economic benefit of the industry when they're looking at, you know, how they look at the industry within their state. And recently there was news out of British Columbia where the government decided to pull the funding to the racing industry. This is going to be devastating to the British Columbia industry. However, I can give you a few numbers. Their foal crop in 2013 was about 220 foals. Their foal crop in 2025, 30. How is the government going to support that? The decline in horses available to race is also impacting handle. Through less races and lower field size, North America handle on thoroughbred racing is down about 2 to 3% through Q3. And in California recently, the Grade 3 Bob Hope Stakes, as an example, for 2-year-olds, in the fall, a race you would think that would oversubscribe, had to be canceled after there were 2 attempts to get it to fill. In addition to this, besides the declining field size in certain jurisdictions, there's an oligopoly-like wagering market where NYRA, the Stronach Group, Churchill Downs, and Penn control about 80% of the wagering market. So that means there's 100 racetracks out there fighting for that 20%. Again, if you're in a jurisdiction that has a declining foal crop, where are your horses coming from? And what's going to happen to your handle? It is safe to say that we have seen or are seeing the canary in the coal mine, and there are things that need to be done. Unfortunately, today we have an esteemed panel of people that are going to offer up some ideas and advice. On the far side there is Harris Auerbach. He's the managing partner of Auerbach Racing and has been a successful long-time horse breeder, thoroughbred breeder. Next to him is Jamie Hayden, who's the Deputy Executive Director of the Jockey Club. On his left is Ismail Izzy Trejo, the Executive Director of the New Mexico Racing Commission. On his left is Diana McClure, board member of the Virginia Thoroughbred Association. And next to me is Mike Tanner, who's the Executive Vice President and CEO of the United States Trotting Association. You may wonder, after all the thoroughbred folks here, why we have a standardbred person, but I'm sure that he has a lot to offer. So we're going to start out with Harris. Harris, you went on record for the Thoroughbred Daily News in June that California, that is one of the top 5 states that I mentioned earlier, needs to do something. They need to do something to prevent the decline that's happening. Can you touch on where you were going with that comment?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Harris Auerbach. I'm an owner breeder. I was vice chairman of the California Thoroughbred Breeders Association for 5 years, and my family has been in horse racing and breeding for almost 50 years. We are a unique breeder in that at one time we were one of the largest breeders in California, and since then we have transitioned to more of a boutique breeder with all of our brood mares based in Georgetown, Kentucky. There are many reasons for this. I don't have to share with everybody in the room some of the issues that California faces as a whole, but in terms of the breeding population, we've seen the numbers steadily decline, and we're in for an even bigger one as we just lost the largest breeder in the state, Mr. John Harris, passed away unfortunately this year, and his farm always accounted for about 400 foals a year. There, half of which were either farm-owned or farm partner-owned. There's no magic solution to California other than trying to incentivize people to breed through better racing programs and better sales programs. Many things have been tried. One of the solutions I had while I was on the board that I still think is viable, one is a regional breeding program. Now we're talking about different regions of the country and how we can increase breeding. Well, California is unique, as is New Mexico, as is Arizona and Washington, that we are all on an island. You cannot van in for a race. You have to be stabled where you are running just because of the immense geography. So one of the ideas I proposed about 12 or 14 years ago was that we pool all our breeding programs together, pool our racing programs together, let everybody run in every state. It benefits both the smaller states like Arizona and New Mexico and the larger state like California. And there was basically resistance from all sides, especially California, where my fellow board members were more concerned, well, why should we share breeders' awards? So one of the tricks with dealing with regional breeding programs, and I think Izzy's going to go more into this, is that everybody all of a sudden, part of being regional is you are provincial in nature and you're looking to protect what you own. But as foal populations decline, we have to find a way to bolster the available horses for all these tracks to use. And like Diana has done with Maryland and Virginia, how to pool them and make the tracks work congruently and not as enemies, more as partners in that. That would be the first step to adding some stabilization, especially in California where we lost the whole northern circuit, and now horses that are really $5,000 claimers, maiden eights, don't have a place to run. 1 week a race at Santa Anita or Del Mar is not enough to convince people to breed more. So that's the first of several ideas I have. I don't want to be long-winded, and we'll turn it back to Paul.
But, so Harris, yeah, you threw out the first pitch here, and regional breeding programs. Jamie, the Jockey Club has kind of grabbed that and is starting to emphasize, maybe some states getting together and doing this. Perhaps you can touch on where the Jockey Club is at.
Yeah, we were very interested in the work that you all did in Iowa and in New Mexico and Arizona through Doug Reed and yourself, Paul. And when the state breeding programs were first created, the language was good at that time because there was more foals. So they stuck in language that Harris talks about that restricts you. As the foal crops dwindled and shrunk in very large parts of the areas in the country, we think after listening and watching Maryland, Virginia this past year and their success that we're going to have to try to get creative. Like Harris said, he was probably 14 years too early and wave the flag for everybody. However, there has to be more opportunity for these regional breeders outside of Kentucky. Obviously, we would love to give everybody the historical horse racing language and allow them to conduct historical horse racing. That's probably not going to happen in the majority of states. So we think that us providing data and modeling for regional racing programs and regional breeding programs would be great as a way to open up more opportunity for these guys to run.
Yeah, so, Harris was a visionary in a way and came up with a good idea that wasn't a good idea until now it's a good idea. But Izzy, New Mexico and Arizona announced in September that they were going to partner on their breeding programs, and which was a huge step for both jurisdictions. Maybe you can touch on how that came about and where you're at with it.
Good afternoon, or good morning, everyone. Izzy Chair with the New Mexico Racing Commission. Thank you for attending this conference with us. And to Mr. Auerbach's point, his idea only took 14 years to travel to New Mexico. He must have been traveling by donkey or so. But looking at the New Mexico story, it's one that raises red flags. We are a jurisdiction that introduced lottery machines in 1995. And a lot of us know the story, how they got implemented at racetracks. Breeders, horsemen, track management went together to legislatures and said, hey, this is going to help our breed programs. This is going to help us breed more and better horses. We're going to be able to sustain the horse racing industry. Well, I think New Mexico is an example of just the opposite has been happening. In a study done by RGE, Doug Reed, Paul Reinvigorate, and others, it indicated to us that our thoroughbred breeds, our foal crop, has declined since 2008 over 75%. In 2008, New Mexico foaled 1,078 foals, which was 3.3% of the national crop. And as of 2 years ago, 2023, it's down to 269, which is merely 1% and change. So it's a alarming thing to witness happening. But other statistics that just prove that we do have a significant problem is just right around the corner in 2018, New Mexico had over 11,000 thoroughbred starters. We've experienced the pandemic, got through that, we came out of it, and now in 2024 we only had 5,400 thoroughbred starters. So it's time for us to hit the panic button. So fast forward to September 2025, the New Mexico Breeders Association took the initiative to reach out to our neighbors in Arizona and say, hey, do you want to implement a cooperative effort between Arizona and New Mexico? We will let Arizona breds run in New Mexico in restricted races, and Arizona, if you could do the same for us. So the program got off the foot, and that's a great thing. And I'll say that since that time, the program's increased 500%, but before you give me a standing ovation on that, it went from 1 horse to 6 horses. But let's put it in perspective. We broke out of the gate slow. This is a brand new program, a new idea. It's innovative. Just like Mr. Auerbach said, no one wants to really share their good fortunes in jurisdictions with others. But I truly believe this is the time to start speaking about this on a national level and growing this type of program. I don't think New Mexico should start with or stop with Arizona. I think we need to go into the entire Intermountain region, possibly including California, because you look at our neighbors to the north, Colorado, Racing's very limited there. Arizona's down to a winter race meet, which that meet at Turf Paradise continues to decrease their race days. And in New Mexico, we have year-round racing, giving away over $60 million a year in purse money, 188 days of live racing, and that's down significantly from the 345 we had back in the early 90s. So the system's trying to correct itself, but we need horses. They're the gas that makes the car go, and this is an idea that we hope will grow and grow and grow. So when we have regional circuits, people from Colorado can come down to New Mexico and race in the winter when there's no racing at Arapahoe. And same thing in the summertime, Arizonans can come bring their Arizona breds over to our jurisdiction to run all summer. So we're hoping this program will grow because we think it's a necessity right now, because despite the slot money that we have for purchases in New Mexico, our breed industry is not growing at all. So we're looking forward to seeing this program advance.
So a little bit of a slow start, but you're still progressing. But two states that actually did get something going this year that was successful that we'll hear from Diana, but Maryland and Virginia. And Diana, can you give us some insight as to how the program, well, what the program is, how it got started, and maybe some of the high points, the success of it?
Hi, I'm Diana McClure. Thank you for having me here. First, I'd like to say that I've been on the HPPA board for 20 some odd years, and I'm on the Virginia Breeders Board as well. A lot of states don't blend their boards, but ours always has, and we have an incredible team in Virginia that has overcome a lot of adversaries. We only have a boutique racing meet. It's very hard to inspire people to breed for 2 or 3 months out of the year. 9 years ago, we lost our racetrack, and we were all sitting around going, okay, well, now what are we going to do, and how are we going to inspire anybody to have horses in Virginia for anything? And we developed the Virginia Certified program, which allows horses to come to the state for 6 months, and then they are eligible to win bonuses, up and down the Mid-Atlantic from New York all the way to Virginia. And those are year-round bonuses that are paid out. So we thought, okay, now we've got something here. So 4 years ago, our foal crop was only 100 foals a year, and we were projected to have 150 for 2026. Doesn't seem like a lot, but for a state that didn't have racing for several years and then only has a short meet, we think we're doing pretty good with that. And again, I can't reiterate enough the people that we have in our groups and in our boards that are making these things happen. So it became a natural segue this year. Last year was the first year back, or 2 years ago we were back running against Maryland head-to-head, and we were all struggling still to fill races. And our people reached out to their people before this year's meet and said, why don't we make all of these restricted, state-bred and Virginia restricted, we have 2 qualifications in Virginia, why don't we combine them so that when Colonial is running and Maryland is shut down, all of the stakes that would have been running in Maryland, those Maryland-bred horses still have that opportunity to run in those races and not be shut out until the fall. Laurel, or Maryland, has a very, very stakes-packed schedule in the fall, so they possibly would have lost a few stakes, and they thought, that's not a bad idea. So we combined them, and we made all these state-bred restricted races during the Colonial meet. The Maryland breds could run in them just like the Virginia breds. And then when we moved to Laurel, Laurel said, okay, our Maryland restricted races can be Maryland-Virginia restricted races. So the opportunity for the trainers and the owners to get to run their horses basically year-round now presented itself as a very, very exciting thought. And Maryland was completely receptive. It wasn't that hard to do. In the very beginning, when Colonial first opened, there was a Maryland-Virginia partnership between the 2 tracks. So it really wasn't hard to reestablish these ideas. And it worked out very well for everyone. At our current foal crop, without the certified horses and the Virginia breds and the Maryland breds, it would take us 45 years to incorporate or produce enough horses to fill those races. And I can't tell you how many years in the past I sat there with Virginia breds, and not Virginia restricted, but Virginia bred, and it'd be up to 4, and we'd be scouring the country to find 5 or 6 to fill a race. And that has been the case all along in Virginia. Izzy knows. He worked in the racing office. I mean, it was just such a struggle. So it worked out this year to be a win-win, I think, for everybody. Maryland came to Virginia and increased their purse structure for those same races from 1 million to 1.8 for the value that Virginia's purses added into those stakes to bump it up. And they took, I guess they had 41 horses, 41 Maryland breds that ran in Virginia, and we had 10 Virginia breds run in those races. So that goes to show you that without this partnership, without the Maryland horses to go in those races, they simply wouldn't have filled.
Right.
And
Right.
we wouldn't have had the opportunity.
So we're hearing opportunity from both Diana and Izzy, more opportunities for your horse. Also collaboration, and I applaud what Virginia and Maryland did. I mean, it's great that they got together like this, but Mike, why are you here?
I've been asked that a few times. Yeah, which one of these is not like the other?
I do actually have a question for you besides
Please.
that, and it's that the standardbred industry is actually in the U.S. is actually seeing their foal crops either stabilized or slightly increasing over the last few years. Maybe you can touch on what are the standardbreds doing and why is it successful?
Yeah, it's funny because some of what I'm about to talk about mirrors what the other panelists have said. So just for some background, if you go back 10, 12 years ago, the North American number of mares bred, and I include Canada in this too, in these figures, was a little over 12,000, and the foal crop was about 7,400. Now those numbers alarmed us. It would have been even worse without the consideration that the average starts per starter for a standardbred per year is about 18.3. Whereas I think for thoroughbreds it's about 6. So for every one race a thoroughbred runs, a standardbred will race 3 times, and that's helpful, but still that number got low. And it's crawled up. Over 10 of the past 11 years we've seen growth. And now the list of mares bred is a little over 20,000, and the foal crop this year is estimated to be 12,400, I believe. There are a bunch of reasons, I think, for this. One is opportunities, quite frankly. If you go to a standardbred sale, open up the page in a catalog, and you are going to see horses more often than not eligible for state-funded races in multiple jurisdictions. You'll see open up a page, and this horse is eligible for New Jersey, Kentucky, and New York funded races. I think standardbred racing over the past few decades has been a lot more creative in trying to leverage those opportunities and be a bit more liberal in terms of recognizing sire location, owner location, foaling location, et cetera, and being flexible in those regards. Secondly, sire stakes programs on the standardbred side have a greater emphasis, I think, than they do with thoroughbreds. It is not unusual to see a horse skip a major stakes race on a national level to race in a sire stakes because the purses are so lucrative. It doesn't necessarily mean that the competition is less either, because some of the sire stakes races, particularly in Ohio and Pennsylvania, I'll say just off the top of my head, tend to be very, very competitive. So there's that. And I think also another thing you'll find in harness racing that is not the same in thoroughbred racing is kind of a multiple level type feeder system. I'll use Ohio as an example, and I'll tell a personal anecdote. My wife with some partners bought a relatively cheap yearling in 2012 from a sale in which 70% of the horses made it to the races at 2. Unfortunately, her horse was not one of those. Got a chip, needed some time his 2-year-old year, came back as a 3-year-old, took 8 starts to break his maiden, finally did at Scioto Downs, and it was judged at that point that he wasn't quite ready to go into the next condition with the raceway horses. But in Ohio, there is fair racing at 63 county fairs, offering decent purses. And so he was dropped in there. He reeled off 7 wins and 8 starts and came back to the raceway still with his non-winners of 2 condition eligible, because those fair races were not considered that. So that went into the calculus when deciding whether to buy the horse, because there was an out if he was a little slow to get going, where he could be competitive, where money could be brought in. And I think you see that at the sales a whole lot. Our sales are doing quite well right now, relatively speaking. It used to be unheard of that you would hear of 7-figure yearlings on standardbred sales. I know that's common on the thoroughbred side. But now the major sales, it's not uncommon. You'll see 3 or 4 a sale. And there's just a kind of a solidity there. It's customer confidence, I believe. I mean, obviously, the market share that harness racing has compared to thoroughbred racing it's not the same. Thoroughbred is a much bigger game, so to speak. So I'm not trying to say that, hey, we just got it all going on over here. But I think we've tried to get as creative as we can to encourage opportunities.
And yeah, you just said it again, opportunities. We've heard that word now over and over again. Opportunities drive value for owning a horse. Jamie, the Jockey Club in Toba had a workshop recently, and from my understanding was fairly well attended in that. Maybe you can shed some insight as to how that came about, and then what the future of that type of workshop might be.
Yeah, so it came about by Dan Metzger, the CEO of Toba, and Jim Gagliano, our president, talking and looking at the numbers as they get together and do and try to figure out, well, how can we help the Toba membership, which are the state breeder organizations. So we did a closed workshop for the organizations, and the first thing was to really gather all the program information. We have it on our website, and Toba does as well, but we wanted everybody to know the various incentives that were out there. So we went through all the jurisdictions and Canada and assembled a nice book that goes through, here's where everybody sources their awards. As we know, everybody sources their awards and payouts in a different manner. So the first thing we wanted to do is see, how's everybody getting their money? So if they know that's a dwindling pot, you can address it at that point. The second thing was, how would he become eligible for these? Every state has a different rule. I know the Virginia, and we'll hear more about the accreditation program, has been a great success for them in doing some things. But do you have a breedback rule? Do you have to foal out here? Do you have to be by a sire here? Just what are all the rules? The third area we looked at was the fees associated with it. How do you nominate? What does it cost you? And then the fourth item we looked at and we published were, here's how everybody pays out their awards. Is it based on races just in this state, or is it based, the Breeders' Awards, based on where they win anywhere? Just so everybody can have a handle on what you're actually eligible for. We think that there's some great incentives out there right now in some various states, but they just don't have the opportunity to have their time in the light. So that's the first thing we want to do. The second thing we want to do is highlight the work that you and Doug did in Iowa and New Mexico, and let people know that there are other solutions out there. And then we provided an opportunity for the Virginia, see Katie Voss is here, and she participated from the Maryland team, about how that program worked and what kind of success it was. And I know that they were happy in Maryland because their stakes races at Laurel got a purse upgrade. So they actually got to run for more money by going and combining with Colonial. And then the other kind of the goal was to get everybody in the room so they can start talking to each other and exchanging those ideas. I know the guys in Florida have just recently passed it where they're going to start paying Breeders' Awards to open races. So that's another great opportunity that they're using inside of their framework right now. And so our first goal was to see what's the appetite for this? Is everybody interested in doing this? And we're pleasantly surprised at not only the participation but the feedback afterwards. I know several states that are already trying to communicate with neighboring partners and looking at, hey, we're in Washington, we race in the summer. Where are our horses coming from? So going forward, we've committed to not only doing the workshop again, but we're trying to develop a set of internal tools right now for us to look at and maybe possibly give out to the breeder organizations and racetracks that will show where these horses are coming from. So if you click on Turf Paradise, then you have a set of parameters that will allow you to, here's where these trainers made their last start. Here's the raw numbers where they're coming from, so that you could possibly go to some other jurisdictions and say, I know this doesn't sound like we're part of the same team, but let me show you where our horses are moving together. So we're going to try to organize some regional breeders workshops next year as well to feed into these ideas so we can provide that data that we have and show the organizations actually who's participating in your races. I know in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, if you look at the cards, you'll see New Jersey and Pennsylvania breds running at different racetracks. Well, they're adding value to that. We believe that we should try to figure out how to bonus those people or give out incentives to keep racing and providing more opportunity. Just because that race didn't fill at Parks doesn't mean you shouldn't run. You should provide another opportunity for them somewhere else, whether that's New Jersey, West Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, or any of those jurisdictions.
And Jamie, you just highlighted the incentives in that. Harris, they did announce in California some new incentives for California breds for different races and that. Maybe you could touch on your thoughts there. And frankly, my million-dollar question to you is what needs to happen in California to get you to breed back there?
A lot to the second part of your question.
Not to put you on the spot.
Actually, I'll start with the second part. Not only do we need stabilization at the racetracks, we need it at the farm level in California. We've lost a lot of farms. That trend is continuing. Unfortunately, one of the 3 largest farms is up for sale right now, and it's irreplaceable at this point. One of the things, there was an act in California, an agricultural act called the Williamson Act, which prevented farmland and agri-land from being developed into shopping malls and housing developments and all that. It is now sunsetted in most of the state, and that's why a lot of the smaller farms and even a couple of the larger ones are no longer in service. So we have to start with the ground up, with the farms, and I think we have plenty of stallions, and we do have people interested in breeding in California. I just think people are looking for certainty, and our friends at First Racing could sure add some by saying we're going to be around for the next 5 or 10 years. We've had no such assurances. All I see are things about horse shows and the Olympics, and I think they're wonderful, but in order to breed, we need to know that there's actually going to be a place to race when those foals are of racing age. So with that part of the question, until that stuff is settled, I'm going to keep my broodmare band in Kentucky where they do offer racing and purses. And if the horse isn't good enough to compete there, they can run in some less competitive jurisdictions, a van ride away. In terms of what the Breeders Association is doing, I applaud their efforts in terms of developing new programs. I think they're still caught up in part of the old mentality of things. For instance, they did a bonus that they will help pay the shipping with $3,000 for people who buy mares at Keeneland and ship them to California. But then they managed to put a restriction on it that the mare has to be bought for $20,000. Well, those mares we lost in Northern California that were running at Golden Gate, frankly, weren't selling for $20,000. So in other words, they've just provided a subsidy for people who were already buying and bringing mares to foal out in Southern California. So I think there still needs to be some adjustment in the thinking. I do like that Santa Anita is going to allow double conditions in the California bred races coming up on the same surface. I always thought it was counterproductive to say you can win the condition on dirt and then turf, because from my experience, at least with racing, turf horses don't want to run on the dirt and vice versa. And it's not an extra opportunity when you put that restriction on. So I'm glad they've lifted it. The only thing I worry about is, does it hurt the open conditions? Will those races suffer in terms of filling? And even with regional breeding programs, we still need horses from other breeding programs to fill the cards. So there's still a lot of work to be done, Paul.
Thank you. Diana, we already talked about the success of the program in Virginia and Maryland. Do you have any other jurisdictions that you're looking to possibly partner with, or anything in the next few years that are going to come out of the Virginia-Maryland agreement?
Yes, there has been talk of, we're literally going like Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and Maryland and Delaware actually had some bonuses that they awarded this summer. So it will just be a matter of everybody getting together. And I think everyone realizes now that even if we, don't run head to head, then let's try to figure out a way to fill the races and make more opportunities. If I could just add too, I didn't say that really about Virginia breeding. The Virginia Certified bolstered us while we didn't have a track, and it continues to help. But our Virginia bred program is amazing. And the reason I'm sitting here is because I kept watching and saying, why am I not breeding horses? So now I am. And, you know, my husband and I have a very small training and racing operation, but now we add 3 or 4 horses to that program every year. We pay bonuses all across the country.
Yeah, and I think you told me yesterday, like, what the increase in the number of the foal crop has been in Virginia. Could you maybe touch on that?
Yes, and so we were going down, we were getting down into under 100, you know, 6, 7 years ago. And that's where, you know, Debbie Easter, our president, is a lifer for promoting racing and breeding in Virginia. And you know, she started opening things up, and we do have bonuses that we pay, 50% owner bonus, anywhere in the country. So I know I'm a long way from home, but any of you that have Virginia breds, you're going to make money wherever you are when you run and you win. And that program, I think, is unlike any other in the country as far as that. So for us to have gone from around 100 4 years ago to a projection of 150 this coming year, when we've only had racing back in the state for 3 years, we all know it's like climbing Mount Everest to breed a horse and get it to the race anyway. So the fact that we've been able to bolster it by another 50 horses, I think is really helping, and we just have to keep getting it out there that no matter where you are in the country, if you have a Virginia bred, you're going to win a bonus.
Well, I pointed out at the start of this that of all the state, that every state that's not part of the 5, there's only like 3,000 foals. So to increase 50 is significant, and we'd like to see obviously that 3,000 become 5,000, become 6,000, because now we're talking about a foal crop over 20,000 probably. So yeah, again, you know, great success there. Izzy, you're the only regulator on this panel. What role does the regulator have in promoting breeding within the jurisdiction?
Well, that's a good question, Paul. Even though we are regulators and our road is paved pretty quick or pretty straightforward with road signs, you know, but just being a lover of horse racing, you can't help but try to enhance the industry in any which way we can. So we continuously have discussions with the breeders. This idea actually originated out of the Racing Commission a few years ago, and they finally listened, and we're happy for that. But you know, the other thing is to continue that dialogue, because there are restrictions in this program. We hear that word a lot here on this panel so far today, and one of them is Arizona breds, you're welcome to come to New Mexico, but in stakes races, New Mexico breds have preference. So to me, that's kind of like inviting me over for Thanksgiving and saying I can only eat the stuffing. And so I said, lift the restrictions, let it flow open, let competition flow. I think that's the premise of our industry, is competition. So as regulators, if there's any statutory changes that need to happen that will open the doors a little wider and force the hand of the breeders to allow competition in, I think we're going to be major supporters of that.
Good. Mike, we've heard about some of the incentives that have been offered and some of the incentives that are being proposed for thoroughbreds in some of those jurisdictions. Do you see those happening in the standardbred industry, and what role does the USTA play in that?
Yeah, I think really money is the greatest incentive for economic behavior, and people will race and people will breed where they stand to achieve the greatest reward. And so state-bred programs, sire stake programs, I think are the lowest hanging fruit. I'd like to kind of tag onto something that Izzy was talking about, though, and talking about the role of the regulators and whether that regulator is HISA or the state racing commissions or the breed registries like the Jockey Club, like the USTA. I think if an owner, a prospective owner, does not have confidence in the integrity of the game, that is going to hurt, because people are not going to want to be part of that. And you'll see that reflected in sales prices. And so that's one of those things I think that all of us share in investing. I mean, again, everyone knows that the USTA is not a HISA supporter, but I can tell you personally and on behalf of the board, we support the concept. And we applaud what the Jockey Club did involving 5 stones a few years ago. We have our own version of the Standardbred Racing Investigative Fund, in which we're similarly looking into things that we feel need to be clarified. And we've worked with the racing commissions as well in doing that. So I think we all need to have a game that people want to buy into. I think that's a great incentive right there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and one thing that when you bring up that the regular people trusting in the game, it just shows how interrelated everything is, whether it's the purse money or how fair the racing is, and all those things do, and opportunities, and how that drives the price of a yearling, that incentivizes people to breed, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to ask one more question to Jamie, and then we're going to open it up to questions. And Jamie, it's basically, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see?
Well, I would like to win the Derby. Oh, not that. Oh, different magic. Oh, for you all. So I think if we could provide everybody the regulatory framework that they did in Kentucky to allow historical horse racing to help supplement purses would be the first. That's not going to happen. So I think my other magic wand would be to assist states in getting rid of some of this language that doesn't allow them to have the creativity they need. I think, like I said, when we first started these programs, it was a good intent that Florida bred, Florida sired, Florida foaled all competed in Florida. Now with the dwindling foal crop and the population, they've made adjustments to their program because they had the flexibility inside Florida to do that. I don't know if other states have that flexibility. So it's going to take us now, and my third one, of making government our partner again. You know, we found when we went and worked with the NTRA and lobbying the bonus depreciation, that when you went in, you presented your case, and we're an agribusiness. Our crop is horses. We provide a direct impact on all of our economies as soon as the horse is born, and it extends out through his life, from the feed man to the board bills to the paint and all of that. So we have to go back in and on the local level lobby in a progressive manner to make government our partner again.
And I think we heard a little bit about that, your last point about government yesterday, and particularly I know that Florida really talks about, you know, working with the government, not only because of decoupling, but just being in front of government and that. And, you know, you can't emphasize enough that the breeding, the number of foals you have, the economic impact of your breeding industry is one of the things that the governments in states or provinces in Canada really look at. I will ask if anybody else has any other thing to offer up before I throw it to questions. Mike?
Yeah, just very quickly, just for the audience's edification, breeding in standardbreds is different from thoroughbred breeding in that ours is entirely artificial insemination. And it's been that way really since the late 50s, I believe. So this has, from our perspective anyway, it's safer, it's more convenient, and it allows for greater genetic diversity. That ties in with our book limits. Can't breed more than 140 mares per year. And that was based on a genetic study that Dr. Gus Cothran completed on our behalf in 2009, I believe. I know the Jockey Club moved towards that as well, the 140 book limit, and it faced significant opposition, and it got walked back. But again, I applauded them for that. I look at the results on our side, and I think it has led to opportunities for stallions that might not have normally gotten them. And we've only had maybe 6 or 8 horses per year that have hit that 140 book limit. So I would just put that out there. There are some fundamental differences. It's not apples to apples.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up now for questions if anybody.
I'm from Virginia, and I think there's another issue that we need to address is black type. When we started, we had 7 or 8 black type races, and everybody liked it as breeders. But over the years, they've disintegrated. We're down to 1 left, and we managed to salvage a 2-year-old race by the help of Maryland. And because we're all trying to save racing, and the regional coordination seems to be a way that helps, maybe it's time to have the black type committees look into some alternative ways to extend this a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, Jamie, I know that's more of a TOBA question. I'm not sure if you have any comment.
The Black Type Committee has a certain standard that they meet, RQS score, I think it's called, and a minimum purse minimum, and they go through and evaluate that, and it's something that was brought up at the workshop as well, so I know that they're looking at it.
Hello, Tom DiPasquale from Minnesota. You mentioned the role of government. I wonder if anyone has an opinion about the initiative that Governor Wes Moore started in Maryland with a strategic planning committee appointed by the governor's office to bring in all of the horse industries, racing and otherwise, in the state to build a strategic plan for the benefit of the horse industry writ large.
That was something I think that Debbie Easter really speaks about in Virginia, and that's the Virginia Thoroughbred Alliance. I know in Kentucky they have the Keep Alliance, which is encompassing of all horse breeds, and then the Kentucky Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders, led by Chauncey Morris, also do lobbying efforts along with the racetracks. But I know in Virginia they had the Virginia Thoroughbred Alliance where all of them came together, and when the situation presented itself, they were all in the room together already to make the correct answer, or provide the correct answer, I should say.
Diane, do you have anything to add there, Diana?
Yes, I mean, basically what we did when the racetrack closed, we were in a situation where we didn't know what to do. And again, our wonderful people, our lobbyists, our board members, got together, and the first thing that we did was actually go in and immediately apply for the license so that we would have a license. And there's only one racing license in Virginia, so we did that. And then as we started growing and had OTBs that were operating through the Virginia Thoroughbred Association and the HPPA, we created the Virginia Equine Alliance so that we'd have an umbrella, have a nonprofit in place, so that then it became wonderful. We ended up getting a racetrack several years later, and now we have HHR, and that's why we're alive, and that's why we're going, because of the money that fuels that. But that's exactly what we did, was develop the VEA, which is the Virginia Equine Alliance, which is the umbrella over all of us, and then we meet together, and luckily we all get along very well.
I'd like to add to this. I got to say I'm jealous of Maryland and Virginia and these places with friendly governments, and that's part of the obstacle we face in California right now. We did have a governor in Jerry Brown who was receptive to horse racing and understood the implications for agriculture. I do know that both the Thoroughbred Owners of California and the Breeders Association spend a tremendous amount of time and money lobbying in Sacramento, but we have some very stiff enemies there, and right now we have a government who is not looking for any coalitions. They're looking to fragment us, which makes it even more imperative that we have strength through numbers.
One more question. We have about 2 minutes left.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the panel. Glad that you're here. Glad we're having these conversations. My name's Steve Cook. I'm with the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders. Jamie, thanks so much for the shout out on our export incentives. That is, I think Virginia and a couple of others across the nation would agree, that is your holy grail for driving foal crop, having those foals incentivized across the nation. There's another half to that holy grail, and Jamie, you'll know where this is headed.
I was going to say before Stephen gets up, something we haven't talked about is breed to race incentives.
We deeply believe that breed to race is the other half of this, and especially if you can do breed to race on a national basis. So in Florida, we were ready to put $1 million into that and get started on a program. Here's the roadblock. And maybe this one's headed for Izzy's lap, since he's the sole regulator, or maybe it's even bigger than that. But the roadblock we run into is if you're going to pay the breeder an award for still being the substantial owner of a horse that wins a race today, wherever that race may be, we need to know for sure who really owns that horse and to what percentage. That's full stop for the project until we figure that out. I suppose it's partly an appeal to the industry to help us suss that out. Maybe it's a conversation that needs to be had, or I would also welcome your comments on how to move that forward.
You wanted Izzy to answer that?
We can treat it just as a comment, maybe, because I don't want to broadside anybody.
That sounded more like a comment.
I prefer that, Paul. Just a comment.
So there's, Stephen's correct, there is no, the only state that licenses down to 5% of the horse ownership is New York. So that's the only state that we know that makes you get a license if you own at least 5% of the horse. So it's going to have to be a rule that's written and establishing an ownership database.
So that's the blocking factor, Jamie, is
I would think, yeah, I mean, if your problem is you don't know who exactly owns the horse, it's the licensee of the owner. So we know that all states license a different, well, they do everything a different way, but we all license a different way as well. Even though we have a compact where you can get your license together, you still must meet that criteria. And New York's the lowest percentage, and that's 5%.
Thank you.
All right, thank you to the panel, and thank you to everybody that joined us today, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Thank you. We're just going to get the stage changed, so in 5 minutes, be sure to come back for the micro-poly panel.